Behind the glitter and glamour of 1970s rock stardom lurked a darker reality. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the struggles faced by some of music's biggest names, so get ready because we're taking a nostalgic ride through the highs and lows of rock and roll's golden age. Hey there, music lovers, and welcome to the channel. Today, we'll be taking a trip down memory lane to a shadowy side of fame that plagued some of the greatest bands of the 1970s. And sure, their tunes had topped the charts and their shows packed out stadiums, but behind the scenes, these rock gods were fighting some serious demons. From drug addiction to tragic loss, we're uncovering the stories that shaped this unforgettable era of music. So buckle up, and let's kick things off with one of rock and roll's most infamous duos. Aerosmith's Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, better known as the Toxic Twins.
Well, Steven has always loved Joe because Joe defines cool. Joe is the rock star of the band. And Steven respects that so much.
Have you ever wondered how you end up with a nickname like the Toxic Twins? It's not because they were best friends who loved to play pranks. Aerosmith was one of rock's greatest and most iconic bands that gave us hits like Dream On and Walk This Way, but for Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, their rise to the top came with a dangerous edge. They fought a brutal battle with drug addiction, which also messed with the band and their personal lives. It's said that they had blown millions of dollars on their habits in the tune of $60 million, which is a whole lot of cash going up in smoke. And here's a wild fact. Joe Perry was so deep into his addiction that he showed up high to his own wedding. Talk about a not-so-sweet emotion. But their story isn't all doom and gloom. Despite nearly breaking up the band and bouncing in and out of rehab, the Toxic Twins turned things around. They've been clean for decades now, and their nickname sticks around, although a reminder of the crazy times that they lived through and overcame. So the next time that you're jamming to sweet emotion, just remember, they lived through some not-so-sweet times to bring us all of that music. And it just goes to show you, even rock stars are not immune to the struggles of life. And speaking of struggles, let's drum up the story of another legendary band whose time at the top was tragically cut short. I'm talking about Led Zeppelin and their incredible drummer John Bonham. Have you ever heard of Led Zeppelin? Well, of course you have. They're often called one of the greatest rock bands ever. But did you know their time at the top was cut short by tragedy? John Bonham was their drummer, and he wasn't only good, he was a full-on prodigy. His powerful drumming was a large reason Led Zeppelin became legendary. Those thunderous beats and whole lot of love, well, that was John Bonham. But here's where things get dark. He had a serious drinking problem. Not just a few beers after the show, it was actually rather heavy, and so bad that sometimes he missed performances and recording sessions.
He really loved his wife and he really loved his kids, Zoe and Jason. I think that John's only problem was he had a classic drinking problem. His personality completely, he was a different person sober than he was drunk.
Imagine showing up for a Led Zeppelin concert to find out the drummer wasn't there. Sadly, in 1980, his addictions caught up with him, and he died from alcohol poisoning at just 32 years old. It would shock the entire world, and the rest of Led Zeppelin felt they couldn't go on without him, so then they broke up the band. It makes you wonder, if John Bonham had gotten help for his addictions, what other amazing music might Led Zeppelin have created? It's a reminder that even the biggest stars sometimes need support. Now let's switch gears and look at another rock icon who faced addiction, but with a different outcome. I'm talking about the seemingly indestructible Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. If you're into rock and roll music, you've probably heard people joke about Keith Richards being immortal, and honestly, with everything he's been through, it's a miracle he's still alive today. Just like the Toxic Twins I talked about from before, Keith had a well-known drug problem, and as a member of the Rolling Stones, his troubles were splashed all over the newspapers. Keith was hooked on heroin and other drugs, and it led to crazy situations. The police...
Drugs, they seep into your life. You're not really aware of it at first.
The police had even once raided his home, Can you imagine being one of the world's biggest rock stars and having the cops bust down your door? His addictions didn't only cause legal troubles, they messed with his performances and relationships with the rest of the band. But here's where his story takes a different turn. Despite all the chaos and close calls to death, he managed to turn his life around, and today at the age of 80, he's still playing music. It just goes to show that no matter how deep you're in, change is possible if you're willing to work for it. Now let's look at another story from the 1970s rock world. Not everyone was as lucky as Keith. Some musicians overcame their demons, but others weren't so fortunate. Which brings us to the heartbreaking story of Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac. Have you ever heard of Fleetwood Mac? Before Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham joined, there was Peter Green. He wasn't only a founder of the band, many people say he was one of the greatest guitarists ever. His bluesy solos on songs like Black Magic Woman were mind-blowing, but his story takes a sad turn. He began using LSD and it really messed with his mind. I'm talking not only feelings being a bit weird, the stuff caused major changes in his personality and gave him serious mental health problems. Peter went from being a brilliant and creative musician to someone his bandmates barely recognized. He became unstable, which made it impossible for him to keep playing with the band that he began. And the toughest part, he tried to get help and did get a bit better, saying that he was never quite the same person that he was before the drugs. It's a harsh reminder of how dangerous that some drugs can be, especially to our mental health. And his story shows that not every rock and roll story has a happy ending. Some of these musicians paid a heavy price for their lifestyle, and the musical world lost some incredible talents way too soon. Now let's talk about Sid Vicious, the bass player for the Sex Pistols, one of the most infamous punk rock bands ever. The Sex Pistols were all about rebellion and shock, and Sid fit right in with his wild behavior, but it came at a high cost. He was pushed into using heavy drugs to keep up the band's image, and it not only affected his music but also got him into serious trouble with the law. And at one point, he was even accused of murder. His story is short and tragic, dying at the age of 21 from a heroin overdose just after getting out of jail. A harsh reminder of how the rock and roll lifestyle can go terribly wrong. Was the image worth the price that he paid? It's a tough question that many musicians have had to face. Now let's switch gears to the Beach Boys. When you think of the Beach Boys, you probably imagine sunny days and surfing, but behind those cheerful tunes was Brian Wilson, and his story was not all sunshine. Brian was the brains behind many of the Beach Boys' biggest hits. He was the main singer, producer, bassist, and pianist, but he had his own demons as well. He had struggled with mental health issues and tried drugs like LSD, which had scary consequences. He began having repeated nervous breakdowns. Imagine trying to write a happy song about surfing when your mind is in such a dark place. While he kept making music and even had a solo career, he never quite reached the same heights as he did with the Beach Boys. It's as though his drug use had put a ceiling on his incredible talent.
When I took the LSD, it was an 8-hour pill. It started at 7 in the evening, and by around 2:30 or 3 in the morning, I went to the piano and wrote Some of California Girl.
His story reminds us that even people who create happy-sounding music can be fighting a tough battle inside. Now let's talk about Janis Joplin, one of the greatest female rock stars of all time. When she took the stage, her powerful voice and raw emotion grabbed you and would not let go. And if you've ever heard her sing Piece of My Heart, you'll know what I mean. Offstage, Janis Joplin fought her own battles. She got caught up in using hard drugs like heroin and speed, along with heavy drinking, and it took a serious toll on her health and career. Tragically, she died of a drug overdose at the age of 27. The music world lost an incredible talent way too soon. Her death is a stark reminder of how dangerous drug abuse can be, even for the biggest of stars. Remember Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys? Well, his brother Dennis also had his own troubles. Dennis was the band's drummer and singer, and unlike others, he was the real deal when it came to the surfing lifestyle that the band sang about. He loved adventure, and he loved the ocean. But Dennis also had a dark side, struggling with drug addiction which hurt his music and personal life. His behavior became unpredictable, damaging relationships with his band members. Sadly, he drowned at the age of 39, a huge loss for the Beach Boys and music in general. His death goes to show us once again how addiction can have terrible consequences, even for those who seem to have it all. If you thought that rock stars that I've talked about before were wild, well, I'm about to look into the world of Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop is the frontman of the Stooges, and he wasn't only a musician, he was a human tornado on stage. His performances were like nothing else in rock. I'm talking about diving into the crowd, rolling around in broken glass, and generally acting like a man possessed. It was shocking, dangerous, and people couldn't look away. A lot of his crazy behavior would be fueled by drugs, and his addiction became so bad that it broke up the band, causing him all sorts of personal problems. It's a miracle that he even survived it all. But he did survive, and not only that, he also thrived. He kicked his habits and went on to influence countless punk and rock bands, and today people celebrate him not only for his music, but his incredible resilience, and he's living proof that it's possible to overcome even the toughest of addictions and come out stronger on the other side. Now a rock legend that's shrouded in mystery, Jim Morrison of The Doors. He wasn't your average rock star, he was more like a rock poet. As the lead singer of The Doors, he was known for deep, hypnotic voice and poetic lyrics, and his stage presence that just oozed charisma. When he performed songs like Light My Fire or The End, it was as though he were casting a spell on the audience. He had a dark side though, struggling with drugs and alcohol, which made him unpredictable both on and off the stage. Sometimes that added to his mystique, but often it would cause problems for him and the band. Tragically, his story came to an early ending. He died at the age of 27 years old, and to this day, people aren't sure how exactly it happened. The mystery is only added to the legend of Jim Morrison. Even though he's been gone for decades, his influence on music is still huge. Many people consider him one of the best rock and roll singers ever, and his story serves as both an inspiration and a warning to musicians who have come after him. What a journey we've been on today, exploring the darker side of fame for some of the biggest names in 1970s music. From Aerosmith's Toxic Twins to the tragic tales of Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison, these stories show us that the rock and roll lifestyle isn't all glitz and glamour. These musicians gave us some of the greatest songs of all time, and many of them paid a heavy price for the fame. Their struggles with addiction, mental health, and the pressures of stardom remind us that even our biggest idols are human, with all the frailties that come with it. But it's not all doom and gloom. We've also seen stories of incredible resilience, like Keith Richards and Iggy Pop, who have managed to overcome their addictions and continue making great music. These stories from the 1970s still resonate today. They remind us of the importance of mental health, the dangers of addiction, and the power of redemption. But I want to hear from you. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Do you have memories of listening to these bands or artists? And perhaps you even saw them perform live. Be sure to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you know any good stories about 70s musicians that we didn't cover, let us know about it. We may feature them in a future video. If you enjoyed this look into the dark side of 70s rock, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, because it really helps us out. And if you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you never miss out on when we upload a new video. What era of music should we explore next? The wild 80s, the grungy 90s? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. And while it's great to appreciate musical legends, it's also important to learn from their struggles. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.